Welcome to this episode of the Strong and Kind podcast. This week we talk to John Flagg. John is an athletic trainer. He's a coach. He's a mentor. He's a really strong power lifter. He's squatted a lot of weight, and he's got a really great perspective. This is a really fun conversation. We go kind of all over the place with it, but I hope you enjoy it. Let me know how it went. Give me a like or a 5-star review on YouTube or Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. Thanks a lot. Check it out. All right, John, let's start it off big. What is it like squatting 700 plus pounds?
That's a great question. 700 pounds is relatively comfortable. I do think once you get past probably the 600-pound mark, you have to take into account a whole new set of rules when it comes to the barbell itself. It moves a lot more than people give it credit for. And then with each 100-pound barrier, it moves more and more and more and more and more. So like I always think of there's this interview back in the day with Blaine Sumner when Blaine broke the all-time world record in single ply in USAPL. And he's at the Arnold and he squats down and he comes halfway up and he just stops. And you're like, oh, did he hit a sticking point? You're like, what's going on? And then he just stood up. And he's talking in an interview about how he's used to the bar kind of oscillating up and down. But when he got about halfway up, he could feel it actually oscillating in a circle. So he stopped for a second, let the bar settle, and then finished the squat, which number one is insane to even feel that, to stop over 1,000 pounds and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna let this chill out for a sec. Let me just give me a sec to let this kind of like settle down, and then I'm gonna finish standing up. But you don't take that into account. So the more, because I squat raw, I squat in single ply, raw with wraps, all that stuff. I mean, I've hit with, if we're not talking about any accommodating resistance, 950, 980 in a single ply suit with wraps on, and the bar is just all over the place. So that's the first thing. That's absolutely terrifying because it's just there's so much movement, and then the pressure, the pressure is huge. Um, I was mentioning to Jared the other day the first time I squatted over 1,000 pounds was with a cambered bar, and my vision literally just like all the way down to a pinhole, get into depth, and then as I stood up, it opened back up. So pretty wild experience.
I couldn't remember what your best squat was, so I just said like what, I just went north of 700. So what is your best squat?
In competition, my best squat is 854 single ply in wraps. That was at Freaks Come Out at Night 2 this year in a suit that everybody made fun of me for because I literally just slipped it on. You're not supposed to be able to just put stuff like that on. It's supposed to take a lot of work. So everybody kind of laughed at me. In training, straight up, in single ply with wraps, I think 955. And then I've with accommodating resistance, so with bands or chains, I've been able to do 1040, so 1,040.
All right, so this is great. Like why do you do this stuff?
This is the brand of discomfort that I enjoy the most. Um, for me, and this is how I've also reconciled. You have a lot of people in strength training that like to hate on a whole bunch of other different types of activities. This is how I've reconciled like not having a problem with CrossFit, not having a problem with marathon runners, not having a problem. Like I don't have a problem with anybody else's chosen version of activity because you just have a different brand of discomfort that you like. If you like pain over a hours long period and you love running marathons, go for it. Like more power to you. That's awesome. I like my discomfort in absolute maximal extremes in as short a time period as possible. That's what I like. That's getting an unrack for 1,000 pound squat and going down and up shouldn't take much longer than 10 seconds. And then in that 10 seconds and after that 10 seconds, I am in heaven. It's great. I love it. It's just the brand of discomfort that I like. So for me, as long as you're okay being uncomfortable, we see eye to eye. And I don't care how you find that.
I think yeah, it doesn't matter as long as like people are like challenge getting out of their comfort zone a little bit, right? And that's ultimately what a lot of this is like it's just it's beneficial to get out of your comfort zone and then wherever it takes you. I mean, I don't know, like I don't think most people are probably not going to squat above like 300 pounds like ever. I don't know what percentage like that, like if you squat 3 plates, I don't know what percentage of like that puts you into, but much less like 700, 800 pound type stuff, which I think the normal person would hear that and be like, that's insane. How does the body even, how do you even train to do that? Right. And that's like where I go next. How long have you been doing this? This is why you shouldn't drink carbonated water because I'm burping while I'm talking. But how long like have you been training to do this? And then like how do you like plan out your year, or do you plan out your year, with your coach? What does that look like?
I've been doing this for 25 years. I can't believe I can even say that out loud. Like to consistently, and here's the thing, right? Like when I was 15, because I'm 40 now, right? When I was 15, it was occasional off-season workouts with the football team, but I was always kind of like a weight room kid. I enjoyed it in high school. I did. My dad had bought me. I always feel like this is the same old damn story you hear from like old school power lifters. I had the Weeder bench press set that was, full of sand. I didn't have that, but my dad did, buy me some dumbbells, and I had a squat rack that was in our house, and not a nice one. It was just kind of like a crappy universal machine. I look back on it now, and I actually used that thing in my own first home gym, like 10 years ago, and it was adequate. Um, but I've been lifting weights in some disorganized capacity since I was 15. The big inflection point for me was college because, like, traditionally speaking, I'm an athletic trainer. And my philosophy has always been like, all right, cool. Everybody was always talking about injury prevention, stretching, doing this, doing that. And like playing sports my entire life, what I noticed is the bigger, faster, stronger kids were the ones that got hurt less. They're the ones that more likely came into a game or came into a wrestling match or something like that and did the punishment. So why not just really focus on all the kids that I work with, just getting out there and getting strong as humanly possible, fast as humanly possible, and take care of it on that end first, which kept me in the weight room. It kept me in the weight room all the time. And that's when I started figuring out like how to actually organize training. But honestly, when I was 15, it was like whatever floats your boat. Pull ups. I hadn't really figured out how to squat yet. It was a lot of lunges. Like I didn't have a whole lot of guidance on that stuff outside of one of my wrestling coaches. He was great. Um, but when college hit, that's when I just got into the books. So that's what kicked it all off. And I mean, 20 you do it for 25 years, you do a bunch of shit, some of it really dumb. I am fortunate to say that I have survived all the dumb programs. I've done small up 4 times. For anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's a really high volume Russian squat program. I've done it far too many times. I've done all the dumb stuff and survived to tell about it. When it comes to my training now, it's it's hard to say how we plan, because at this point, like Kevin Can, who's my coach, I think all coaches should have coaches. We go a pretty fundamental conjugate style program because I'm always going to train. I'm always going to move towards that stuff. I'm always in the pursuit of getting stronger maximally. So, like, I don't really plan out too long unless we decide, hey, I'm going to do a meet. The problem with me is that I don't consistently compete enough because I have so many people competing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm filming this right now with you from the Arnold. We had 2 people going this weekend that I'm handling for other people. And, I'm constantly traveling, doing that sort of thing. So when it comes to competing, 9 times out of 10, if I'm at a meet, I'm handling a lifter. Uh, but more recently, especially because of the single ply stuff that I've been doing, have found myself into a more normal cadence. So I'm more than likely going to compete in August at the Open Pro, which is going to be a single ply competition, which means in the next few months we'll probably organize training around being my best for that. But it's been loose planning, really.
Yeah. Do you think, all right, so we can go into this. Do you think periodization as a model, like, is something that most people need to worry about? Do you stay up on programming? I think you do, but do you stay up on like the debate for periodized versus not? Do you care? Like, what does that look like for you?
I do care. I love this debate because John Kiley is the guy that a lot of people kind of refer when it comes to like periodization is dead. And I've been really fortunate to have talked to him twice on the Clinical Athlete podcast.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, he is a brilliant man. He is absolutely charismatic and has one of the best accents to listen to while you're talking to somebody ever. I could talk to Kylie for hours,
Yeah.
right? But I think there's a little bit of nuance in this topic because I do agree with John. There's a couple models out there that are from a time in science that's just gone. You know, when we start looking at rodent models and stuff like that and saying, well, you know, you have to do training in this particular way because these rodents had these sort like from way back in the day, we're starting to lose some validity along those lines. But I think people have taken that argument and said, well, that means you don't have to have any structure in training. I believe there needs to be structure in training, and I do believe that details matter. I don't think they're as rigid and robotic as people make them out to be. There's obviously something to the uh, fitness fatigue curve. You know, like if you try to continually just stack on more weight, more volume, more reps, more time, like eventually you're going to hit a point where you just can't recover. And if you want to peak, you want to show and be able to express all those things you're trying to work on, then at some point you got to chill out and let your body recover and then let it super compensate, right? Let it grow, let it adapt. You need to do that. Uh, However, like the really rigid blocks, especially the more you look into, you know, Mike T always talks about powerlifting being that sport that people compete in, but it's what other sports use to just get ready.
Yeah.
And like, there's a lot of validity behind that because people look at powerlifting and they're like, okay, it has to be these rigid frameworks of like acclimation and that sort of thing. What exactly are you acclimating to after a few years of squatting on a regular basis? Like, how far off of a squat do you have to go to where you still have to acclimate?
Yeah.
And then, even in my own experience, not just with myself, but working with hundreds of athletes, like, do we have to deload every 3 weeks, like some people say? Because I've been able to take athletes and not deload them for 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks at a time. Maybe I deload their deadlift only, but everything else was fine. So there's pieces of it that do I think there needs to be order and structure? Absolutely. Do I think you can actually start to figure those trends out on an athlete by athlete basis with some broader guidelines? Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think everybody needs to dead or deload every 3 or 4 weeks with, 50% of the volume or like this super aggressive pullback. Because I do believe after that, there's this weird rebound effect and you're missing out on a quarter of training a year.
Yeah. And I think there's a psychological implication of as someone who, I love Jim Wendler, and I will probably run some iteration of 531 again just because I like the structure of it and I like AMRAPs and stuff like that. But the psychological, even him, he doesn't explicitly state this in later iterations of the book, right? But he's like, uh, but like dropping down to like 50% for like 5 sets of 5, like it doesn't make sense because it's a psychological thing. Like where if you touched, let's just say you touched 315 for a set of 5 on squats, and then you go back to like 180, you are not prepared the next time you go to hit 300 100 plus again, really, from a psychological or physical standpoint, right? But like, and it also depends on who the person is. I think the biggest thing is like, and you and me get this too, like you're not going to know until you start doing stuff, right? And I think people love the idea of having like a 16-week plan, but like that plan usually goes to shit about week 2, right? To some degree.
Well, and on top of that, I like that you bring up the psychological piece, right? Because everything is a model, right? Everything we're talking about are models, and models have certain assumptions that are made. If we're talking about especially the periodization model, or even like just the way we expect athletes to respond or people to respond, then that model dictates that even in the deload week, it's 50% volume with maximal effort.
Yeah.
The problem is that's not how people actually function. If you call it a deload, then what do people do? Oh, it's like a week off at the gym. They come in, they tic tac around, and here's the deal. I get it. I'm sure there's coaches listening to this going, well, I don't allow my athletes to do that. It doesn't matter. I guarantee they're still fucking doing it. Okay. You just got your E on Spotify. Okay.
I am explicit. Yeah.
All right, good. You
I
just
tried.
got your E on
I
Spotify.
checked that box. Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I'm easing all the listeners into it.
Yeah. 100%.
The storm will happen soon,
I
guys.
think I dropped an F bomb earlier, and my wife will probably be mad at me. But she never. She's like, all right, just quick aside. Mary's upstairs because this is downstairs, and she's like, all you do is talk about the same stuff over and again. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably what it's gonna be. So just
That's
within
not you just get different perspectives around the same stuff. That's what makes it interesting.
100%.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is psychologically, a lot of lifters are going to come in on deload week and they're going to half-ass it. You know what I mean? So if it's a 5x5 at 50%, because I can hear it now, you got people going, well, West Siders or conjugate people, they'll do an 8x3 at 35% bar weight and 20% bands. What's the difference? The difference is they're coming in and they're moving that as fast as humanly possible, along with really focusing on absolutely perfect technical execution. If everyone were a robot, like we make assumptions with, and this is part of the assumptive portion of the model, right? We expect people to come in and operate in a predictable fashion. They don't. Then, yeah, deloading every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks would make more sense if we're coming in doing a 5x5 at 50%. People are still attacking it, but they typically don't.
Yeah.
On top of that, like I have one athlete, she's a high octane defense attorney in Texas, right? I have another athlete. I worked with him for a really long time. He's a partner in a CPA firm. You don't think when April rolls around, that guy's got more on his plate? For a defense attorney, if a big case comes up that gets delayed and delayed and delayed, and then has all these motions and has all these things, that all of a sudden, like getting into the gym's a little bit more difficult, or it's just stressful from the content of the case. Like, we have to take those things into account because they do impact the training environment. And a lot of people disregard that when they start looking at models, because I've heard people say, you bring up Jim's program. Two of my favorite programs out there actually similarly structured. And Dave, I don't know if you've checked out Swede Burns's fifth set, but very similar, to the 5-3-1 structure to an extent, but also has a lot of AMRAPs in it, which are great. But you want just a bare bones effective program where you actually don't have to worry about too terribly much. So if you're under high external stress from life and maybe a move or something like that, that's a great program to run because you just don't have to think about too much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm gonna look at this because he's just even his branding is cool.
Oh,
Um,
Swede. Yeah, Swede's like full blown fire logos and
yeah.
like he's great, man.
Yeah. No, not so I also yeah, I mean right now I'm going through very much like a general physical preparation type. I signed up for an Olympic lifting meet the 13th of April. I'm just kind of saying F it, have some fun. Powerlifting, like trying to be a powerlifter or becoming a powerlifter did make me very, very stiff. Like my groin, it's hurting like from doing Olympic lifts again. But which is fine. I think that's just you got to recognize that, and you can do whatever the hell you want. It's just like what do you really want? And I think that's the other thing we can get into with programming is that people start chasing a lot of different things. I do want to touch on this really quick because
Can I say something really quick on that though?
yeah, 100%.
So this is what I've seen in my experience, and I think this is where you see that bell curve, right? You see that meme where it's got like the Jedi on the
Yeah,
far end of it, right?
yeah,
Well, movement optionality and those feelings, like the sensations of tightness and stiffness, I have found really do ramp up towards that intermediate phase of powerlifting or really any sport that you get into. Because in the beginning, right, like in we've talked about this before specifically, but I always go back to the quote of Chad Wesley Smith when he was talking to Ilya Ilyin, right? Ilya's highly regarded as probably one of the greatest weightlifters to ever walk the face of the planet, and he made it look effortless. Like if anybody wants to go on YouTube, it's what is it? IYLA,
yeah. I can look at yeah. Ilya.
IYLIN. I think
Yeah,
is
yeah,
something along those lines,
yeah,
right? Go watch that dude lift. It's insane. But they talk about he was asking him about his early development. He's like, "Well, I just, play a bunch of sports and do Olympic weightlifting."
yeah,
And as he would get deeper and deeper, it was, just Olympic weightlifting. And obviously he became an Olympian and that's what it became. But then you watch his movement quality just in general life improve as he became more advanced. And I see that too because people lock into the sport and they say, okay, well, now I have to progress in powerlifting. So it's squat, bench, deadlift, squat, bench, deadlift. But then once you get out of that end of the bell curve and you do come more advanced elite, it allows you the space then to explore movement variety and get rid of all that shitty movement because people get locked into it and they're like, oh, powerlifting's terrible for you. Look, I'm 40 years old and I squat 1,000 pounds and I move now better than I did 4 or 5 years ago when I was squatting 600 pounds. And I get down on the floor, I get up off the floor with my kids, I can move around all over the place, I can run them out around my yard. I've got an extra 80 pounds on my body. I'm a bigger dude, but I think people get locked in to thinking, well, I'm in this phase of the sport, so I have to limit myself to progress, where they really don't. And they can explore a little bit more. That stiffness, though, get if you want to be elite, don't think you have to sacrifice it. Get through that portion of that phase in your career and it will come back.
yeah. I think like, I mean, so did you ever read that book Range? It's like one of my
Yeah.
favorite. It's David Epstein, right? And he talks about his comparison was Tiger Woods and Roger Federer, right? And Federer played every sport under the sun until he was like 18, right? And then it was like, all right, I'm gonna go play tennis. And I think, yeah, I think what happens is I see, and I think who did a really good example of this? It was like the Barbell Medicine Crew, maybe, where you have like, instead of going straight at starting strength style, which I want to talk to you about that in a second, but starting strength style, like you just provide more movement variability at the beginning, and then they kind of funnel down to like, hey, what do you want to do? If you want to do anything, maybe you do kind of do some more specialized work for a little while to kind of almost like get through that early intermediate stage. And then it is like, yeah, okay, let's open it back up with more movement variability and stuff like that as you get more, because just doing like the big three with a barbell where there's not a whole lot of variation, like is gonna beat a lot of people down. Right. And it's a lot more fun, honestly, for a lot of people to have some form of movement variability and variation, especially in like the over the course of the year, right? Like, so, and I also just kind of think if whatever keeps you engaged is really meaningful too. Like you like bands and chains. How many times a week do you train 4 times a week?
Yeah, I live 4 days a week.
And then what do you do like for anything else from a physical activity standpoint?
Walk, play with my kids.
Just a lot of walking. And
Yeah.
do you ruck?
So I was rucking for a while. Um, I still do on occasion. I'll add a weighted vest to my walks, or I'll drag a sled behind me. I mean, you know this. I've got a half a mile driveway in one direction, so I essentially just walk that, once or twice a day. I still do some strongman stuff. I've got a yoke that I'll, walk around the driveway occasionally. But I try to do stuff like that and just keep my step count really high.
Yeah. I mean, and that's probably like besides biking, like hopping on a bike, I like it's just have some fun with it. Where I was gonna go. All right, and I want to get into writing a book because you're writing a book. But and I was talking to somebody earlier about the starting strength, the blue book. There's this like LP, like linear progression that's laid out beautiful. Like it's like this is what could theoretically happen, and it's like a dude starts first day is squatting 135, and then like maybe one kind of 10% reset, and then it takes him to like 405. I have a few people I've coached multiple people who like have seen that, and that's their expectation, right? That's their expectation for like linear progress. And that model, and I've gone through it too, right? Like my when I was doing when I my finished starting strength or I finished my LP, it was actually my wedding day. I squatted 355 or 360 for 5, and that was like it was awful. And you know, you're just it's the bar is moving so slow. Your first rep looks like it's RP9, and then you somehow get 4 more, right? Um, but like it's such a almost like a marketing scheme. Like it's almost like a hey, if you do this, this is one of the big things I'm kind of tackling with both business and content is like what a lot of people are putting out is like literally the best case scenario, and they're making you think that that's what we're after. And like that was what that book like did is like, oh, it's just so simple. And it's cool because it can work and it does work, you know. But if you want to do like a simple LP while still riding a bike and maybe playing basketball, like go do that. Don't think you have to sacrifice that stuff to put 5 more pounds on your squat next week, right? So what do you think it like is the elusive, or what do you think that a lot of people go through in the beginning that then they get almost disillusioned when it like actually like it doesn't look like it's going to be like that, or it's just kind of going intermediate where you're not going to make progress every week. It's like, well, I'm going to do this because a lot of people quit at that point.
Well, man, this all comes down to the mentality of it, right? Because essentially, like what that does, that initial LP does, right, is it sets an expectation, and one of two things happen, right? You either reach the goal and you become a brand advocate. It worked. I mean, starting strength is a great example of something that a lot of people within the strength and conditioning industry would call a cult. I mean, you've got some real strong, hardcore advocates for starting strength who think it is the only method to do anything. And the thing is you could probably say that around any style of programming. You know, I make fun because a lot of people are going to call me a conjugate guy, even though I program in a multitude of different ways. It's just that I personally use conjugate myself to lift. That's fine. I'm not drinking the West Side Kool-Aid in any shape or form. I think they've earned and should like get a ton of respect for what they've done, specifically for powerlifting. But it's not the end all be all. And what it does on the other side of it is if it doesn't work, now all of a sudden it's that didn't work and it doesn't work. You're either 2 feet in or 2 feet out. There's no in between. But the thing is it's the how you actually approach training and your mindset around training in and of itself. Because if you think it's as simple as an input creates a particular output, you're setting yourself up for this kind of failure. You're setting yourself up for this kind of gap. Anybody can make a claim. Anybody can make a claim. I can tell you I can put 20 pounds on your bench press in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I can tell you that you can get to 405 in a 12-week training program. I can tell you that you can run the 6-week Candy Toe program. For anybody that doesn't know, that's Johnny Candido. The 6-week program he has is one of the most famous and awesome free programs you can find on the internet. Truly is. People can make claims on its like effectiveness, but there's always going to be a whole bunch of other factors that go into it. So my thought process behind it, and where I've been really lucky, is that I've always looked at the training process as a science experiment. I mentioned I've run small 4 times. I didn't come in, I didn't pick small off specifically because there was some claim that it was going to get my squat to X. I tried it the first time because I was like, well, that looks sadistic. I wonder how much it can improve my squat. And I went into it with that. And I said, okay, let me analyze this. Let me look at what the result ends up being. Not expecting a particular result, but trying to see what happened. And then at the end of it, I kind of do a post-mortem or I do a review and I say, okay, what happened with the program? What happened in my life in that time frame? And is it reasonable to think that if things change slightly, I could get a better result? It's a science experiment. The whole process is a science experiment. And it's never been anything different than that. Anybody that gives you some sort of black and white concrete claim is a fucking charlatan. They just are. Like it is a science experiment. If you can go into a new training block, a new training day, working with a new coach, working with your current coach, and saying, all right, cool, we're going to spend the next 8 weeks and we're just going to evaluate where it ends up at the end, and then we're going to sit and break it down. Great. But if you think there's going to be some actual predictable goal, more than likely setting yourself up for a disappointment.
Yeah. That's probably the best. That's probably the best mindset shift you can probably make for a lot of things in life, right? Like, oh, I mean, it's just like getting a degree. Like, I'm gonna get this degree, and then I'm gonna get this awesome job, and then it's like, oh, actually, I hate this job. Like, actually, I have a client who has went through the whole process of kind of going after what they perceive to be like their dream career, and then it's like they're just disillusioned because it's like this sucks. It's in healthcare, it's not being a PT or anything like that, but or an AT, but it's in healthcare, and it was something that they strive for, and it's not that it's like not their fault, but it is kind of the nature of this stuff is like that's marketing. Like, yeah, you go and you get this degree and life will be good. It's like, well, you still got to show up for and do the work 40 plus hours a week, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, you want to hear the worst thing that ever happened to me as a coach?
yes.
I look back at this and I'm like, that is the absolute worst thing that's ever happened to me as a coach. And a lot of people are going to scratch their head because at the time, I thought it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me as a coach. So I had in 2018, I had a bunch of my guys qualify for the Army. And one of them was going to be at the time the highest level for that. So that's the one where I talk about where I had that athlete that was, I was right next to Ray Williams, Blaine Sumner, Bryce Lewis, Kelly when he was still up there killing it in Canada. Like we all had the same rack together, and my athlete Tommy was there, right? I wrote this big long program out, right? And I asked Tommy in the very beginning of it, I said, "What do you want to hit at the Arnold?" And he told me the three numbers. He said, I want to squat this, I want to bench this, I want to deadlift this. And I was so at the time confident, but now looking back, so arrogant that I wrote this program based off those three numbers. And the worst possible outcome could have happened, which was he fucking nailed all three of those numbers on his third attempts and took third place overall behind Ray and Kelly, just beating out Bryce Lewis by Wilkes points. It was the worst thing that could possibly happen to me because it validated the fact that what I thought I was capable of was true. So then what did I do? I spent a year trying to do that and never replicating it.
Yeah.
Never replicating. And you would think like, oh, John, you had it nailed. No, I was just fucking lucky that day. I
Yeah.
was lucky that day. I think there were some psychological aspects to it. I think him and I had full belief in it, which was a huge, huge thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in reality, like you can't, that's not possible. You can set rough goals. You can say, I want to hit this, and we can work towards that, but we have to bob and weave the entire way through. And it took me another year to figure that piece out. And it was the worst thing for that next year, but ended up long term. Now I look at it and go, man, this is awesome because the details matter, but the details that people don't think matter are what actually matter.
Yeah.
Um, you
Yeah.
know, consistency, attention to your actual mindset walking into training, not carrying around bad days with you, like all those things stack up so much so much more than, okay, am I going to do a 4x4 here? I'm going to do a 4x5.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the intangible aspects of stuff, and just the enjoyment in the process, and then the belief are like huge. Um, like, yeah, I think you've mentioned this a few times to me when we've been talking in like some form, like Mike to share, just trying to figure out a metric for enjoyment, right? Like, how do I measure enjoyment? I think almost like that, it's just probably a byproduct of like their attitude. Their attitude. It's like just coaching a couple lifters at a meet in Wisconsin last weekend. It's like, I think I will say that they were having fun, where a lot of people around them were just like not having fun as much. Like, I'm not saying they weren't having fun, but like, if you're having fun, if you're like smiling when you're doing stuff, or depending on your attitude in general, but like, it should be fun. If you're doing it well, I think you're gonna have fun, right? We've probably been around people where like, yeah, you're not even having fun. You're being like a dick. Like, you're being a dick to yourself and you're being a dick to other people. Um,
Well, and people need to understand the power of fun and the power of novelty. You mentioned Mike. Mike is a quote that stuck with me for so long. Was the first time he came on the Clinical Athlete podcast, and he started talking to us about changes in training and effect, and like I think that's when he was really starting to think about training enjoyment and some of the psychological aspects, because he's like, explain to me how an athlete can change coaches and see an immediate increase in performance. It's not anything with the program. It's not anything with the numbers. And the old coach could very easily say, "Well, see, look, like that's my programming actually coming into effect." When in reality, it's just the change, the novelty, and the excitement of having something new, having a new coach, having a new viewpoint, having a new perspective that all of a sudden allows them to express their strength. It's the same thing. Like if you can come into a meet and you can think this is a new experience, this is going to be fun, this is going to be enjoyable, then the likelihood that you have a great day is a lot higher. If
yeah,
you come in and you're like, this is going to suck, if you go into your training days and you think this is going to suck, and you constantly think that, eventually it is going to suck and it's
yeah,
going to be hard to get out of.
yeah, 100%. So before you lift, like, and on any given day, do you have like a pre-lift? Like, do you have like as a ritual, like, or do you just like or is it wait, you like being in that space? What's that look like?
This is terrible because this is where when people these are the questions that make me realize that I am actually just different. My whole day is a pre-lift ritual. I wake up in the morning wondering what's on the sheet, wondering what it is I'm going to do today. I'm thinking about lifting all day long. So Sundays specifically, Sundays are my heavy day. It's my typically max effort day, um, and that is a very interesting rotation now because you know this, but like I squat heavy one week and I good morning heavy the next week. So I'm thinking about that day pretty much all week long. I don't have like a pre-lift routine other than walking into the house, making sure something's in my stomach, and mixing up pre-workout because I've just it's just what I love to do. Like you can flip a switch and I'm ready to lift. You walk into a gym, I'm ready to go. It doesn't matter. You say, hey, I'm going to pop over here. I'll meet you in 15 minutes. All right, cool. I'm there. Like it's just been such a central part of my life that it's normal. But what I suggest for my clients to give a little bit more practical advice here is to actually set up some sort of routine. Whether that's, you drive to the gym, and you put on a particular playlist on Spotify and like you have a routine to kind of get mentally ready. Whatever you do, you got to shake off your day.
Yeah,
You can't carry into the gym your argument with your wife, the fire that's going on at work right now, like any of that stuff. You just got to shake it off, clear your mind, set yourself up to kind of like roll with it. And the other thing, I always they mention this in the NFL a lot with quarterback throws a interception and then he comes back and he makes a couple great plays. Like short-term memory matters. Have short-term memory with shitty days. Like that pre-routine should not be mulling over what you messed up the day before or the squat that you missed or anything like that. It's a new day. Crank whatever it is that you like to listen to and mix whatever it is that you eat or drink before you lift. You psychopath Gen Zers doing dry scoops of pre-workout, you too. And get your head right to come in and train with clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh I need to get more pre-workout. I haven't been taking pre-workout, but that is just a big part of like the pre-lift routine is just having something like honestly, I so it's funny because I'm reading this. It's really freaking good. And a lot of it is stuff that like we've heard before, but it is like your expectation creates a lot of times like people, and some of it's shaking off when you're having a negative expectation as quickly as possible. But I really do think like the last powerlifting meet I lifted in, it's like my modest work, like, but I went in there and like my first set of squats with like 135, like the bar, I'm like, this is flying, this is gonna be a good day. Like, whereas if I would have been like, ooh, this is gonna be a shit day, which I do think a lot of people do that to themselves without even knowing it. Like, you can totally, it doesn't really matter. Like, either way, it didn't really matter, but what I immediately told myself fed forward pretty quickly, right?
Hmm?
um and then just like, yeah, like doing, yesterday, or no, the day before, I was actually like kind of talking to myself the way I said to myself, all right, talk to yourself the way you would talk to like the way you would coach someone else. And it was dramatically different than like if I would just be alone and kind of like frustrated that something wasn't feeling right. Especially like Olympic lifting is like golf, right? Like
Oh man.
these patterns are you're some days you just don't feel good about it, right? And you do something um and it's just like you can immediately go into a negative state, right? And so like managing your state, managing your expectations is huge. God, they got a lot of I just pulled up pre-workouts and there's a lot of crazy designs on these things anymore. So
Total War from Redcon 1, sour gummy bears.
Total War sour
Yeah.
gummy bears. All right, I'll give that one a try.
Give it a whirl. Just
Uh,
whatever you do, man. All right. When you go to mix it, when you go to drop it into the bucket, right? You got to move your head away because Total War's like it's got a powder cloud that's going to catch you right in the nose and light you up. So
all
drop the
right.
scoop in and pull your head away.
Sour. Okay, I think I see. All right, I'm with you. I'm gonna do this. I'm
There
gonna
you
pull the
go.
trigger. Love
Just
it,
do it.
dude. Sour Patch Kids are the bomb. What do you
They're
eat on?
great.
What is like your meat day? Like, some people eat clean. Like,
Fuck no, I'm a
yeah,
powerlifter. I weigh 280 plus pounds. I eat Uncrustables.
yeah. This is what you got me onto. I love Uncrustables. And
Strawberry Uncrustables. I'm not crazy about the Nutella one, guys. I'm sorry. I get it. Like a lot of people love those, but strawberry Uncrustables. You give me 2 boxes of those on meat day, I am golden. That and a big old gallon of water, not a problem. But
I I like the peanut butter honey one. That's not a bad one, but I do
that
like strawberry the best.
might be an Iowa special. I've never seen that.
Dude, they're Target. I think Target's got them. Maybe you gotta go to Target, not Walmart.
That's what I
Uh,
got to do. I got to move it out to Target. But you're 100% right around expectations. And I get it, especially in powerlifting, self-deprecation tends to be something that's like really cool. But it's not. It sucks. And it's eventually going to catch up to you. I honestly think between that and a lack of openness to training methodologies, I think it's self-deprecation that leads to so many people getting out of the sport within 2 to 3 years because there's this, well, this is going to suck, right? Like this is going to be uncomfortable. This is going to be that. Like I tell people, I'll get feedback from lifters and they'll be like, so how did it feel? Heavy? Yeah, no shit. It's powerlifting.
yeah,
It's supposed to feel heavy all the time. That's the point. Heavy that should be like good,
yeah,
not bad. But we want to frame everything as a negative that you'll get stuck in that for a long period of time. You get stuck into a long period of time. And then the self-fulfilling prophecy becomes real life.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
going to suck. Guess what? You find a way to make it suck.
yeah.
And if you step into training like that consistently, you're not going to find a way to stack up a lot of wins. And wins create, I want to be really clear on this, and I'd like to get your feedback on it. Wins creates a skill set. So for me, you mentioned like coming in and kind of getting your warm up going and seeing how things feel, and like that kind of helps you dictate where you're going to be on the day. I've gotten so successful with that that I can wake up in the morning, walk around the house a little bit, move around, and tell you what I'm going to squat that afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll know the number that I can put on the bar that's gonna be the RPE that matches, because I've been able to come into it so unemotional for so long and hit it that I feel like I'm Nostradamus. Like, it's very few times that I miss what that is. I walked in the other day, on Wednesday before I was going to travel here. I had to max deadlift. I'm like, 755 is probably there today, moving around a little bit. I hadn't even pulled on a bar yet. It was 3 hours before I was even going to lift. I'm walking in to take another call with a honey badger, and I'm like, yeah, I'd probably deadlift 755 today. Go look at my stories.
Yeah.
755 moved at a 9.5, just like I wanted it to. I was done, walked out, finito. But
Yeah.
that's like the 100th time in a row that I've been able to do that.
Yeah.
But it's all because I didn't go, well, this is gonna suck today, and I hope I don't miss this shit, and
Yeah.
oh, this
Yeah.
is gonna feel like trash. No.
I think there's I mean that's a good mindset too, as well as like just you know uh knowing yourself and um like a lot of people who have been training as long as you have, um to some extent as long as like I have, but even I'm getting better at this, and it's something I probably need to work on more, is just like learning to match what your body is telling you with what you're going to try to do, right? And you know, there is a skill in that. You just can't let it be a negative thing, right? It's like literally it is, this is why take what's there is like the ultimate advice for like sports performance. I'm trying to convey this to a few people on my roster. I have one lady that she's awesome. She wants to run, she's getting stronger, like, she's a little bit more just general fitness, but she's a runner. She would call herself a runner. And I'm like trying to kind of teach her like RPE and even RPE as relates to run. And I go, like I had her do like I said like, hey, yeah, let's do like a 5K time trial. Have you done one of those in a while? And she's like, no. And I'm like, okay, so if you wake up and you feel good, like great, hit it hard. If you wake up and you don't feel good, just go run at whatever level you have, and like just put a little bit of a caveat to it. Like, hey, didn't feel the best, went and gave it this amount of effort, because over time we can track that and we can use it as a meaningful way of gauging progress. Like really what I think most of it is like when your floor comes up, we know we've made progress, because you can have an aberration that is like a really good performance. Like we've seen somebody who's like, I squatted 350 and then they can't replicate it again, right? Like they had a really great day and then they can't get back there. But it's like, oh yeah, on my bad days, I'm squatting 315. It's like, okay, that's probably a pretty good floor for, we want to build that up. And if in 2 years your 405 is your bad day, like we know that you've made a ton of progress, right? But like what people look at is just their top end or their really good day, and they judge everything against that. And it's like that doesn't, it's not real life, right?
My favorite part about that too is on when they actually have the PR day, the first thing they try to do is actually tear it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ran my fastest, but,
Yeah.
or yeah, I squatted my heaviest, but like there's always this qualifier to like make it less than too. So you don't actually embrace that, and then you use it as this big marker. It's baffling. That's the dissonance that is difficult for people to work through. But like one of the things I told one of my athletes the other day, because I got this quote, he's like, dude, I'm just in here fighting my demons. You know what I mean? I go to the gym and I'm here to fight my demons. And I was like, well, that's cool. I want you to qualify something though, because do you fight just to fight? Because bullies fight to fight.
Yeah.
Or are you fighting to win? Because if you fight your demons long enough, eventually you should beat them, grow as a person, and be better.
Yeah.
Not I'm just fighting to fight.
Yeah.
Because then you turn into your own bully.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like turning in your own boss or your own worst boss, right? 'Cause-
Bro, we talk about that all the time.
yeah,
Entrepreneurs have become their own worst boss. Ugh.
yeah, yeah. So what do you think the future of powerlifting is going to look like in the United States? Like, I know you could probably talk about this a lot, but there's so many federations. I think it's almost confusing to people. That is the one thing that I think I don't think USAW. I'm not really a critic of anything, so of these things anyway. But like at least USA weightlifting, like there's kind of one central organization like overseeing like USA weightlifting, and where it comes to powerlifting, we've got Powerlifting America, we've got the WRPF now, we've got USA Powerlifting. We've got a bunch of other subsidiary things that I didn't even know existed that are,
RPS, SPF,
yeah,
yeah, we got
yeah,
uh the WPO. Yeah, I mean it's a lot. I mean not again, I hope weightlifting is able to stay in the Olympics for an extended period of time. I know that sport and another sport that I hold really near and dear to my heart, wrestling, are possibly on the outs within the Olympic Committee. I am afraid that once that happens, you may see a split off of multiple federations within weightlifting, just like you've seen in powerlifting, because the inflection point is going to be drugs.
yeah,
That's just what it's going to be.
yeah. I
What was it? The what was it, AWF from
think
a
so.
while ago?
Yeah,
Essentially had kind of stepped out into that realm at one point. But when it comes to what I think the future of powerlifting is going to be, I have some hopes for it, and I have some possible limiters to that growth. Um, I personally think within the next few years, you're going to see it be massively dominated by female growth. I think the women in powerlifting are carrying a massive torch. We are seeing extraordinary progress, not from just a performance standpoint, but from a coaching standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from an inspiration standpoint. And I do find myself very privileged and fortunate to be a part of a lot of those women's lives. I look at a mutual friend of ours, Sophia Veras, somebody like Sam Calhoun, women that are absolutely trailblazing the sport of powerlifting that I'd like to see grow. And I mean, you just look at what happened this past month at Sheffield. If nobody knows what Sheffield is listen to this. Look it up. Sheffield 2024, SHEFF IELD. I think that's how you
yep,
spell field.
yep,
Yeah. Um, it's a massive competition. Some of the most elite lifters in the world down in Texas. And we had a girl that weighs 67 and a half kilos, something like that, which is essentially like 140 pounds, squat 496 pounds. We had another girl squat 660 pounds raw, 300 kilo mark, first time ever. Like, it's just exploding. So I expect that to happen. I also expect the Masters division to grow quite a bit. Now that I'm in it, woohoo! M1, here I am. I do expect people to be lifting longer term within powerlifting than before. So
yeah,
I expect the ranks of women lifters and M1 lifters to grow substantially. The caveat to that is social media. I've also seen a growth of negativity, of elitism, of hate and bullying within the sport of powerlifting that I think I am hoping is starting to come to some level of equilibrium as people have no longer kind of just laid down and let it happen. Because that I would say it was at its peak probably about a year and a half to 2 years ago, where it was getting really bad. But we're starting to see that kind of police itself out a little bit, thankfully, because I don't think there's a better community than strength sports, not just powerlifting. Uh, the community in weightlifting, the community in strongman and strong women, the community in powerlifting is extraordinarily unique, and I think can be a massively positive place for people to meet other people, to enjoy something that's a lot of fun, especially if we remove that bad, very loud segment of haters. If we can help police that out, then the growth that I'd like to see, I think, will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And that you just like in any of this stuff, I mean, wherever people start, you just want them to stay in it for a long time. And like that, some of that's just like not making it such an elitist thing. And that's just the nature of like a competitive thing. Like there's going to be some absolute like units that like are in lifting, like it's just become more of there's a lot more exposure to it, right? And hopefully people are training intelligently. Like me and Sophia did talk about this. People are training intelligently, and it's allowing them to train longer and peak later than we kind of perceived that people could, right? And which is cool. Like,
I'm hitting my best weights at 40 years old, man.
yeah, yeah,
I've been competitively powerlifting for well over 10 years.
yeah,
This has been a long cycle. It's not been a 3 year, oh, look at this guy. Where did he just fell on the map? No, 5 years ago, I was sitting at a plateau in my squat that was 2 years old.
yeah, yeah. And that's the other thing. It's like, you're probably not gonna. You got to just stick with the thing, long
Mhm.
enough to break through. Then people don't. Um,
Well, and this is burned in my memory. 2016. Hey, you're gonna laugh because we were just talking about federations. 100% Raw is a federation that split off from the USAPL years ago when some of the new technology was coming out with like knee sleeves and all that kind of stuff. They wanted to lift just belts and wrist wraps.
mhm.
So they had a really strong regional footing for where I was living. So that's where I started competitively lifting. It's
Yeah,
100% Raw. It was easy to get to, great people, super nice. My buddy and I qualified for world championships. So we go out there in 2016 and I walk into this giant venue in Erie, Pennsylvania, right? Huge. We're in this giant ballroom, uh, you know, theater seating for everybody. It was intense. It was the biggest thing I've ever seen for powerlifting at the time. And I walk in, and as soon as I walk in, all the lights dim and this big spotlight comes up on one of the platforms. And here walks out this like 87-year-old guy. And it's his third squat attempt. I'm like, what? And I don't know, man, probably 70 kilos,
yeah,
right? It's not, nobody's gonna sit here and be like, oh my gosh, he's a world beater. It's 1,000 pounds. No, it's like 140 pounds.
yeah,
It's 140 pounds for an 87-year-old dude.
yeah.
And
100%.
he's out there in his singlet with his belt and he smashes the thing. And I remember thinking to myself, dude, that's what I want.
Yeah,
That's what like we can talk about the actual weight that I put on my back and all that stuff, but I want to be that guy at 87 that's still in there lifting and high-fiving people and having being a life of the party. Because the best part is he's the only guy they played that spotlight for all weekend.
yeah,
I won
yeah,
a world championship, and so did my buddy. We didn't get a spotlight on our shit.
yeah,
We did it all.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so
I
you
love it.
you can do these strength sports for a long time if you do it smart.
Yeah. I mean, and it really just allows like, there's going to be a decline, right? Like, and it's just accepting that and then you start hitting age PRs, right? Or like XYZ, right? And that's okay. That's like rage against the machine, the dying of the
Hey,
light, right?
have you seen the MRI cross sections of even just like
Oh, yeah.
older endurance athletes and
Yeah,
the muscle mass they're able to keep?
100%. Yeah.
Like that stuff's there's too much research on the protectiveness of like muscle mass over the ages. I don't care if you're not able to like produce the amount of force that I can.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's not about that. It's about that. That is legitimately longevity.
Yeah, 100%. And I honestly think like we don't really know. We can make these. It's just kind of like going back to periodization. It's like we have a model for what we think happens to people as they get older, but like, and we kind of say, people are going to start to decline X, Y, Z, and yeah, we do. But like for a lot of individuals, like we don't know. There's so much variability, right? And there's so
Yeah.
much like potential. So no, dude, this has been great. I appreciate you. Where can people find you? Pitch yourself.
Instagram, John.rebuild_stronger. It just, put it in the show notes or something like that. That's where I'm most active. And I am an open book. Like if you've got questions about this, just shoot me a message. I respond personally. It's not a ghost or a VA or anything like that. It's me. So if you want to chat a little bit about stuff, just let me know. Hit me up with a question, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you about it.
I love it. The next one of these will be after you release your book. I meant to talk about your book, but I got to run now.
Oh shit, I gotta finish editing it, so I can even get the thing done.
Hey,
So
props to you. Got to sit down and write. So,
I do.
we were in Nashville last weekend, and there was a sign out in front of a record studio that said, "Write drunk, edit sober." So you got to edit. I guess you're to the editing part, so you got to be sober. So sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm to the editing part, and it is the worst part of the entire process, but it's okay. I'm getting there.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Have fun at the Arnold. Good luck to your people you're handling, and we'll talk again soon. Peace.
Absolutely appreciate you.
Yep. Good stuff.